Shu Sanctum location in Wuchang Fallen Feathers stands as a symbolic convergence of faith, decay, and the fragile boundary between humanity and transcendence that defines the game's lore. Within the broader narrative, the Sanctum represents the spiritual heart of a region deeply scarred by the feathering disease and the collapse of the established order. It is both a sanctuary and a warning, a place built to preserve divine connection, yet slowly consumed by the very forces it sought to contain. Historically, the Sanctum appears to have been constructed as a sacred site dedicated to higher powers tied to Shu culture and belief systems. Its architecture, towering, layered, and intricate, suggests a place meant to elevate the human spirit toward enlightenment. Rituals performed here and showed in Wuchang game were likely intended to bridge the mortal and the divine, reinforcing a sense of cosmic harmony. However, as the feathering spreads and corruption took root, the Sanctum's purpose began to distort. What was once a place of clarity and devotion became clouded by desperation, fear, and misguided attempts at salvation. In Wuchang Fallen Feathers lore terms, Shu Sanctum embodies the central theme of transformation. The feathering disease, which blurs the line between human and monstrous, mirrors the Sanctum's own fall from purity into corruption. The monks, guardians, and inhabitants associated with this place often reflect this duality. Some cling to ritual in hopes of preserving their humanity, while others embrace mutation, interpreting it as a form of divine ascension. This tension reveals a key philosophical question within the game. Is transformation a curse to be resisted, or an evolution to be accepted? The Sanctum also serves as a narrative crossroads for the game protagonist. As Wuchang traverses its halls, she is not only navigating a physical space, but confronting the ideological remnants of those who came before her. Corridors, shrines, and locked chambers tell a fragment of larger story, of belief system breaking under pressure, and of individuals redefining faith in the face of suffering. Another important aspect of Shu Sanctum is its role as a container of knowledge and memory. Artifacts, inscriptions, and encounters within the area hint at a lost understanding of the feathering origin and purpose. This suggests that the Sanctum was not merely reactive to the crisis, but may have been intimately connected to it from the beginning. In Wuchang Fallen Feathers, Shu Sanctum is not only a physical stronghold of spiritual importance, but also an area where key bosses embody the ideological and moral collapse tied to the region. The bosses Hu face and Shu Sanctum serve as living or half-living manifestations of its lore, each representing a different response to the spreading of feathering disease. The most prominent boss associated with Shu Sanctum is Bingzhang, a figure whose presence anchors the area narrative significance. Bingzhang appears to have once held a position of authority or spiritual importance within the Sanctum. His role, whether as a guardian, scholar, or leader, ties him directly to the institution's original purpose, maintaining balance between the human and the divine. By the time Wuchang encounters him, however, he is no longer a symbol of order, but rather a distorted remnant of it. His transformation reflects the Sanctum's failure to contain or properly understand the forces it sought to harness. Bingzhang's condition suggests a tragic descent. He is not merely corrupted. He embodies the consequences of a devotion taken to extremes. In Wuchang Fallen Feathers lore terms, he likely attempted to resist or control the feathering through ritualistic or esoteric means, only to become consumed by it. This aligns with one of the game's central themes, the danger of interpreting catastrophe as a divine will. This boss fight can be considered as a confrontation within the Sanctum's ideological collapse. The victory over him is framed as a somber release, an end to a cycle of suffering that the Sanctum could not prevent. Beyond Bingzhang, Shu Sanctum is shaped by the lingering influence of earlier bosses tied to its surrounding areas, most notably Master Raider, man-eating Dhutanga. While not located directly within the Sanctum itself, this boss plays a crucial role in Wuchang narrative context. Dhutanga represents a more primal and external form of corruption compared to Bingzhang's internalized struggle. His presence at the threshold of the Sanctum symbolizes a chaotic world encroaching upon sacred ground. Dhutanga's lore impact lies in contrast. Where the Sanctum once stood as a place of order and spiritual discipline, Dhutanga embodies unrestrained hunger. His grotesque nature suggests what happens when the feathering is embraced or left unchecked without the framework of belief or ritual. By defeating him to gain access to Shu Sanctum, Wuchang symbolically moves from confronting raw external monstrosity to engaging with more complex, internalized corruption within the temple walls. This progression deepens the narrative, showing that the true danger is not only the disease itself, but how individuals and institutions respond to it. An additional figure that deepens Shu Sanctum's lore is a Gluttonous Monstrosity, whose presence adds more dimensions to the theme of excess and spiritual collapse. Unlike Bingzhang, who represents corrupted devotion and internal conflict, Gluttonous Monstrosity embodies unrestrained consumption, both physical and symbolic. Her transformation appears to be driven not by discipline of faith, but by surrender to basic instinct, making her a stark counterpoint to the Sanctum's original ideas. In Wuchang lore terms, Gluttonous Monstrosity may have once been connected to the Sanctum's hierarchy, possibly as a disciple, enforcer, or even a lay follower who sought refuge within its walls. However, instead of pursuing enlightenment through restraint and ritual, she becomes overtaken by hunger, a condition that aligns closely with certain interpretations of a feathering disease. In the end, Shu Sanctum's bosses are not just milestones in gameplay progression, they are narrative pillars that define the meaning of the location. Shu Sanctum location in Wuchang Fallen Feathers is defined as much by its atmosphere and natural integration as by its constructed architecture. The location sits elevated within the mountainous terrains of the warship's Rise region, creating a sense of separation from the decaying world below. This elevation is not accidental. It reflects the Sanctum's original purpose as a place of spiritual ascent, where practitioners sought clarity, enlightenment, or communion with higher forces. The surrounding environment reinforces this intention, with steep cliffs, narrow pathways, and mist-laden air shaping the approach into something almost ritualistic. Reaching the Sanctum feels like leaving behind the mortal plane and entering a threshold between worlds. Nature plays a paradoxical role in Shu Sanctum. On one hand, it enhances the beauty and serenity of the location. Sparse trees cling to rocky ledges, wind moves gently through open country yards, and distant mountains create a tranquil backdrop. On the other hand, this natural calm is undermined by subtle signs of decay. Vegetation appears overtaken by unnatural growth, hinting at the spread of the feathering corruption. The environment is not violently overrun, but quietly altered, as if nature itself is being rewritten rather than destroyed. This quiet distortion mirrors the internal corruption seen in the Sanctum's inhabitants. Architectural Shu Sanctum in Wuchang Fallen Feather is a towering multi-tier temple complex rooted in the traditional Shu-inspired design. Its defining feature is verticality. The structure rises in lowered levels connected by staircases, narrow corridors, and open balconies, encouraging constant upward movement. The materials used in the Sanctum's construction further emphasize its dual nature. Stone foundations provide a sense of permanence and resilience, while wooden frameworks and ornate carvings add cultural identity. Red-painted beams and temple roofs stand out against the muted tones of the surrounding mountains, making the Sanctum as a place of importance. However, time and corruption have left their marks. Surfaces are cracked, paint is faded, and certain sections appear partially collapsed or abandoned. This suggests that the Sanctum was not destroyed in a single event, but eroded over time, much like the beliefs it once upheld. Interior spaces are designed with both function and symbolism in mind. Large halls likely served as gathering places for rituals or teaching, while smaller chambers and hidden pathways hint at secrecy and hierarchy within the Sanctum's order. Shrines and altars are positioned as focal points, drawing attention to the spiritual practices that once defined the location. Yet many of these spaces now feel hollow and distorted, as if their original meaning has been lost or corrupted. Shu Sanctum in Wuchang Fallen Feathers draws heavily from real Chinese history, regional identity, and traditional architectural philosophy, particularly those associated with the ancient Shu region. While the Wuchang Fallen Feathers game fictionalizes its world, many elements of the Sanctum feel grounded in recognizable cultural and historical parallels. First, the very idea of mountain sanctum or elevated temple complex closely reflects real Chinese religious architecture. Throughout the history, Taoist and Buddhist temples were often built on mountains, such as Mount Qincheng or Mount Emei, one of the four sacred Buddhist mountains. These locations were chosen deliberately. Mountains were seen as places where the earthly and the divine intersect, making them ideal for spiritual cultivation. Shu Sanctum mirrors this concept through its high-altitude placement and lowered ascent, reinforcing the idea that enlightenment requires both physical and spiritual effort. Architecturally, the sanctum's multi-tiered wooden structures, red pillars, and sweeping roof lines resemble traditional Chinese temple design from the Tang through the Ming dynasties. The use of timber framing system allowed buildings to achieve height and flexibility while maintaining the structural harmony. The red colors commonly seen in temples symbolized vitality, protection, and sacred importance. In Shu Sanctum, however, these same features appear aged and decayed, echoing how real historical sites, especially those neglected or damaged during periods of unrest, can fall into despair over time. There is also a strong parallel with the concept of monastic complexes as self-contained worlds. In Chinese history, large temples were not just places of worship. They functioned as centers of learning, governance, and even refuge during chaotic times. During periods like the late Ming dynasty, when social instability and disease were widespread, religious institutions often became places where people sought both spiritual answers and physical safety. Shu Sanctum in Wuchang Fallen Feathers reflects this role, acting as a heaven that ultimately failed to protect its inhabitants, mirroring how real institutions sometimes struggled to maintain over during times of crisis. The theme of corruption within sacred spaces also has historical resonance. In late imperial China, there were recurring critics, both in literature and official records. Some sects even engage in extreme rituals of heterodox beliefs, especially during times of upheaval. The transformation of Shu Sanctum from a place of enlightenment into one of the distortion parallels these anxieties. It reflects a broader historical concern: what happens when faith is pushed beyond reason in the face of a disaster. Additionally, the sanctum's connection to disease and transformation can be loosely compared to historical responses to epidemics. In traditional Chinese society, outbreaks of illness were sometimes interpreted through spiritual or cosmological frameworks, linked to imbalance in qi, divine displeasure, or supernatural forces. Rituals, talismans, and temple practices were used in attempts to restore harmony. Shu Sanctum's role as a place that may have tried and failed to contain or understand the supernatural fiction echoes those historical patterns of bleeding medicine, religion, and belief. Finally, the Shu cultural identity itself is important. The ancient Shu kingdom has long been associated with mysticism, isolation, and unique traditions distinct from the Central Plains. Some archaeological discoveries reveal a culture with striking, almost otherworldly artistic expressions. Shu Sanctum in Wuchang Fallen Feathers captures this sense of regional uniqueness and mystery, presenting an area that feels culturally grounded yet slightly alien. In sum, Shu Sanctum is not a direct copy of any single real-world location in China, but rather a synthesis of Chinese historical themes: mountain worship, temple architecture, monastic life, and the tension between faith and crisis. Its design and narrative echo real traditions while transforming them into something darker and more ambiguous, fitting the Wuchang Fallen Feathers tone ideally. Thanks for watching, hit that like button and subscribe for more Wuchang Fallen Feathers and other Souls-like video games, lore and guide videos, and stay sharp out there.